I'm in the remotest reaches of the wilderness of Tsavo. For days, I've been searching for one specific elephant. His name is Balguda. Probably the most magnificent great tusker alive today. Ever since I knew of his existence some years ago, I told myself that if I ever found him and photographed him, that would be the culmination of this project and the time to tell this story. As I sit waiting along the river and another day has gone by without seeing him, my mind wanders off to the journey that brought me here, remembering the encounters with all the magnificent tuskers I made along the way. My name is Federico Veronesi. I'm a wildlife photographer, and I'm happy to present my third book called Walk the Earth. It's published by Prestel, and it's a journey across Africa into the world of elephants in search for the last great tuskers. My love for elephants and great tuskers dates back to when I was a small child, growing up in a big industrial city in the north of Italy. Elephants were everywhere in my drawings. I would spend hours setting up dioramas filled with elephant herds roaming through the savannah. I would read books, and among the stories, the one that fascinated me the most was that of Hamed, the greatest tusker in Kenya and probably in the whole of Africa in the 60s and 70s. He was such a magnificent creature that President Kenyatta granted 24 hours protection to him. And when I came to Kenya on my first safari in 1982, I remember going to the Natural History Museum and seeing his skeleton and his reconstruction. And it's probably in that moment that the seeds of this book and this project were laid. After university, I decided to move to Kenya to follow my passion for wildlife and to live as close as possible to the savannah, to live among the animals as much as possible. And after working a few years in Nairobi, I moved to the Masai Mara, set up my base in the Masai Mara National Reserve. I followed the stories of the small cats. I followed the stories of the big cats, the Great Migration.
Which bit?
So after some time in the Masai Mara, I started spending more and more time in Amboseli National Park at the foothills of Kilimajaro. It's an amazing place of contrast between the dry, dusty savannas and the lush marshes at the core of the park that attract wildlife for water and pastures, and among them, obviously, elephants. Elephants are the main feature in Amboseli. They're everywhere. They're extraordinary to see them walking across the plains. It's just an amazing sight. It was here in February of 2010 that I made the encounter that probably really marked the beginning of this journey. I was waiting on a road where elephants normally cross through on their way to the marsh, and I saw among the herd a huge bull towering above all the others. And when he came out, his tusks were almost reaching the ground. He was enormous and majestic, and it looked really almost like a reincarnation of Hamed. His name was Tim. He was the greatest tusker I'd ever seen. So Amboseli was coming out of a terrible drought that occurred in 2009, and the female elephants were coming into estrus right about at the same time when the rains returned and the food returned to the park. So there was a lot of social activities. It was amazing to follow Tim through those days, following females, courting females, females being attracted to him as the most dominant elephant at the moment. It was at that time that I also made my first encounter with two other great tuskers that I followed extensively through the following years. Tolstoy, coming from the same family as Tim, and the second bull that I encountered at the time was Craig. The first time I saw him in the marsh, and I saw this elephant which looked very much like Tim. The tusk shape and size was very similar, so I thought I was seeing Tim, but after a while I realized that Craig has a notch in his ear that Tim doesn't have. I realized there were two different elephants. A lot of people were confused at the time because they were so similar. And up to today, Craig is probably now the most famous elephant in the world, the most gentle and relaxed and tolerant creature. He's just the best ambassador for great tuskers at the moment. So 2 years later, after the peak of social activities of early 2010, there was an unprecedented baby boom in Amboseli. More than 150 babies were born in the space of 6 months. I was there, and one morning in particular, I was on the same road where I met Tim 2 years before, and in the distance, I saw this huge cloud of dust coming up from the trees, and a herd of elephants appeared from the dust, and right at the middle was this most amazing matriarch with long straight tusks pointing to the ground. Her name was Theodora. She walked right up towards us, right past the vehicle, and it was one of the most amazing and fascinating scenes I still carry with me up to today. Eventually, I realized that in other parts of the country as well, there were still quite a few of these great tuskers. And so I decided to spread out and go look for them. The first place I started from was the Tsavo Hills. Not too far from Amboseli, just to the east in between Amboseli and Tsavo. Beautiful volcanic hills covered in dense vegetation. And there was one particular elephant that I was looking for here. His name is One Ton. Then it was time to explore the last and greatest refuge for great tuskers in the world, the endless wilderness of Tsavo. About 20,000 square kilometers of bushes, thick bushes at times, and savannahs where elephants roam enormous distances, where finding one individual elephant is extremely difficult, and moreover, elephants are nowhere near as tolerant of vehicles as they are in Amboseli or in the Mara. On one of my first days, I was faced with a straight-on charge from a matriarch from very far away, kind of giving me the tone of what it was going to be like in the next few years, trying to find the elephants and photograph the elephants of Tsavo. On my first visit in the dry season, I spent a lot of time around waterholes. And eventually, with time, I started finding some really nice tuskers already on my first trip. White Satao, voi. Konomojutu, an elephant that I would meet again regularly in the following years. The next time I was back, a few months afterwards, I was back in the rainy season and the situation was totally different. The park was completely green. The elephants had spread out, scattered out. I could hardly see any elephant for quite a few days, actually.
Well, the situation doesn't look good at all. Finding the big tuskers in these conditions is just about impossible.
But eventually I started finding places where there was actually some very nice groups of bulls gathering out in the plains, and so I had some really nice encounters at that time.
Finally, after a long drive, I found a group of bulls out in the open plains, and there are at least 3 big tuskers in there. It's just an amazing encounter to see them interact, to see them playing and feed, and all in the open grasslands. It's just the most amazing feeling.
It was at that time that I met one of the greatest tuskers in Tsavo, a fabulous bull called Lugard. One of the characteristics of the Tsavo elephants is their color. They pick up the color of the red soil, and it made such a fantastic contrast with the green of the bushes around him.
Just now, returning from the most amazing encounter with the biggest of the tuskers here in Tsavo, bull named Lugard. I'd almost given up finding him until when finally, just to the side of the road, I noticed a group of elephants, and among them there was him, having a mud bath. Amazing.
So people often ask me, how can you photograph the same species over and over again for so many times? And with elephants in particular, especially among the great tuskers, they're all different, they have different expressions, different behavior. I want to try to, through the images, capture some of their personality, to look a little bit into the soul of each individual elephant. And furthermore, elephants being so big and with such a characteristic shape, they lend themselves to so many different kind of images, from tight portraits, tight details, to wide scenes where they fill the landscape with their mere presence. And you can photograph them from a low angle to convey their majesty. You can photograph them from slightly higher to put them and blend them into the landscape, into the endless African savannah where they belong. Furthermore, elephants inhabit so many different African landscapes. So I find it particularly interesting to photograph them in totally different settings, from the deserts of the Namib to the lush forests of the highlands of Kenya to the enchanted woodlands of Manapools. You can find elephants everywhere. Now, one of the most memorable moments along this journey happened back in Amboseli, when one morning I found the 2 greatest tuskers of Amboseli, Tim and Craig, hanging out together. They were walking slowly to a waterhole. I was so taken up by emotion that for a long while my brain could hardly function. I could hardly manage to get a decent picture of them together, also because often they were walking far apart from one another, so it wasn't that easy. But eventually, as they neared the waterhole, I was waiting for them there. They lined up beautifully, they walked straight towards me, one after the other, and it was just an unbelievable sight, unforgettable sight. Unfortunately, not long after that, a few months after that, the terrible news came that suddenly Tim had died. My last sighting of Tim happened in December of 2019, and I had found him feeding, browsing over abundant vegetation after the rains. But I noticed something strange, that he lay down on both sides and kept laying down for about 10 minutes on each side, which is something I'd never seen him do. And I found it strange, but I thought he's probably just tired. And I wonder if it's something that had to do with the disease that eventually caused his death. I went back to Amboseli shortly after his death, and driving through the places where he had been, where he had walked so majestically, was really sad. The place felt completely empty. Until at one moment, one afternoon, I saw from the distance a big bull looking away from me with very long tusks, which I didn't think I had seen him before. When he turned around to walk towards me, I had almost a flashback. He looked almost the same as Tim looked when I first saw him 10 years before. His tusks were absolutely similar, quite similar to those of Tim. I later found out that his name is TJ and he's actually Tim's nephew. So it felt like nature was giving me living proof in flesh and bone of the natural flow of the circle of life. Besides TJ, there are other new tuskers that are following up in the footsteps of Tim. Among them, the most charismatic is a bull named X004. Now, why this name? The Amboseli Trust, who have been studying the elephant population in Amboseli for more than 50 years, give names to elephants according to the family they come from. With X004, he was not born from the population, so he was assigned a code which still stands today. I first saw X004 in April of 2021, but I had already heard of him because his reputation was of quite an aggressive elephant towards vehicles. A bit randomly, he wouldn't charge every vehicle. At times, he would decide that he didn't like some vehicles, so he would target them, and he did actually hit a couple of vehicles in his lifetime. So when I first met him, I was not expecting it to happen. I was on a short game drive with my wife and son. We were just going out for breakfast, and we came across him, and he was chasing another bull across the plains. It was an unbelievable first encounter. He was in must, and eventually, as he came close to the road, I was really a bit unnerved and unsettled. He looked a bit unsettling. So we kept distance. Eventually settled down. He started grazing next to the road. I started to take a couple of pictures, and suddenly another bull came up towards him in an aggressive manner from behind him. He saw him from the back of his eyes, and he turned around, and the two bulls had a massive confrontation, a massive fight right there in front of us. It was just an unbelievable moment. And of course, X004 chased that other bull as well. So it felt really like I was in the presence of an elephant establishing his rank among the other bulls. And it was a thrilling encounter. you could really feel that it was a special creature full of energy. I didn't feel like that with any other elephant since my first encounter with Tim. Among the tuskers of Tsavo, there were two in particular who I really wanted to see and I considered essential milestones for this project. The first one was probably the most amazing female tusker that ever existed, at least for sure in the last 100 years. Her name was Dida. The other one was a bull, only seen occasionally from aerial patrols by rangers and by the Tsavo Trust, who monitors the tuskers in Tsavo, and his name is Balguda. I went back in the dry season to Tsavo. I searched old areas, new areas. I drove incessantly through bushes, across the plains, along rivers, waiting at water holes. I changed areas a few times, trying to find these two elephants. So I ended up spending a lot of time without even taking one single picture, at times without seeing a single elephant for days, and frustration started building up. I started questioning what I was doing. I started doubting whether I could really have a chance to actually find these two elusive elephants on my own. Eventually, I changed location again, and I camped in a new place where I'd never been before, near the Galana River. And already as I was driving into the area, one afternoon I found a beautiful tusker in the water. His name is Tsavo. It was an amazing sight. Then the next day I was surrounded by herds of elephants walking back and forth across the river. Among them, two other fantastic tuskers, Buchuma and Shirango. It was an amazing feeling being surrounded by elephants in such an untouched and wild setting. The elephants were very shy. Buchuma in particular, when I first came across him, when I first saw him come into the water, he was never even letting me closer than 500 meters. So it was really fascinating to see the behavior of this elephant, so different from the ones I had photographed before in Amboseli or in the Mara. So I didn't find neither Dida nor Balguda at that time on this trip, but finding this elephant heaven in the middle of Tsavo was a big encouragement, made me feel like I was on somehow the right track, and it gave me the strength to keep going and keep searching and keep searching. So at the next rainy season, I went back to Tsavo to try to find Dida again. I was hoping she would be out with her family grazing on the fresh, long green grass. And in fact, it was full of elephants. It was full of families everywhere. It was amazing to be in Tsavo at that moment. But for a couple of days, I hadn't found her yet. And I was talking one afternoon on the phone to a friend, telling him I was starting to get a bit frustrated. But just as I was saying that, out to my left, I noticed an elephant with very long tusks I stopped, put the phone down, and it was her. She was not too far from the road. She was looking amazing. So I parked and I waited for her to get close. I started shooting with a medium telephoto lens because initially she was a bit far, but she came closer and closer and closer and she couldn't fit in my lens anymore. She stood there in the perfect pose, that one I was dreaming of, a couple of meters away from my vehicle with her tusks reaching almost to the vehicle. And so I had to change lens, put on my wide angle. Took me longer than it should have due to the emotion, but eventually I finally laid back down on the floor of my vehicle. I started shooting and I started breathing again. The pressure released, and she stood there, changed pose a few times until almost it was like she was making sure I had taken all the pictures that I needed. And then she walked away, crossed the road, disappeared into the woodlands, and I never saw her again. Another one of the most memorable moments on this journey happened one late afternoon in June of 2021. I was at a waterhole watching elephants coming and going in Tsavo, and it was getting really dark. It was really dark. I was already starting the vehicle to start heading back to camp, when suddenly I saw a big bull coming out of the forest in the darkness. I picked up the binocular and I saw that it was a huge tusker. And I started thinking back at all the reports, all the photos I had seen of Tsavo tuskers, and I couldn't match him with anyone that I had seen in pictures before. He came to the water, drank. I struggled to take a single image because it was really pitch black. At one point I couldn't even see him anymore with my naked eyes, but fortunately the camera could still pick up some movement, and I managed to grab one or two reasonably sharp images. And then when I drove back to camp, I started sharing the picture with all my friends who know about tuskers, the researchers that I know from the Tsavo Trust, and the rangers from the area. No one had ever seen that elephant before. It was such an amazing encounter, thinking that such a fantastic and remarkable tusker could live unnoticed for all his life, basically, by people, was an extraordinary feeling, really.
Oh, Mummy is unbelievable. Oh, he's just amazing. Who is this guy? I've never seen pictures of him either.
So a couple of months after that, I was back in Amboseli. I was back to one of my favorite locations in the whole world, I can say, which is the dry Amboseli Lake that only fills up briefly during the rainy season, and then it dries up and it leaves a stunning flat expanse of cracked soil where animals walk through every day to get to the marshes, to the water, leaving these beautiful trails across the soil: zebras, wildebeest, giraffes, and of course, elephants. It's a stunning place, so fascinating. It's so essential. It's only earth and sky. And when the elephants walk through it, it's one of the most timeless and eternal scenes that I've witnessed. So that morning I reached to the lake, I looked with the binoculars, and in the distance on the other side of the lake, I saw a group of elephants, and they were clearly almost ready to start crossing the lake. As I got closer, I realized that they were all bulls. It was a group of bulls, and among them was a stunning great tusker whom I immediately recognized, and it was Tolstoy. Tolstoy spent a bit of time with the bulls, with the other bulls, and then he eventually decided to walk away on his own across the lake. And I had never seen a great tusker crossing the lake before. So it was another one of those surreal moments that I experienced on this journey. At one point, I parked to the side of the trail that he was following. I pointed my camera to the ground, to the cracked soil, and as he came closer, I waited for him to feel the frame, and that's how the image on the cover of the book is. And that's also the moment that inspired me, the title of this book and this project, Walk the Earth. So selecting the images for the book, narrowing down all the encounters, all the individual elephants that I met through the years was a really difficult task. As I selected the images, I wanted to maintain a certain variety, a certain dynamic in the book. Tried as well to bring the people into the world of elephants by featuring different behaviors through the book, from fighting, mating, courtship, finding food, swimming across rivers, drinking. Furthermore, I wanted to portray the different habitats where elephants live, from the deserts to the woodland to the savannah. And most importantly, I retained what has been a recurring feature of my previous books as well, the harmonious blend between black and white and color. Color to portray the red soil of Tsavo and the African bush, and black and white, so timeless, so eternal, disconnected from the here and now. On a personal level, this is the book that reconnects me the most with my childhood. It's the book I would have dreamed to make as a child, I think. And in general, I wanted this book to portray and connect people to elephants as individuals, as intelligent, sentient creatures, and therefore highlighting the importance to protect them. As I drive through bushes and palm trees rustled by the wind, I keep asking myself, is Balguda even remotely close to here? Is he maybe drinking at night? Where should I go to look for him? Suddenly, a brown-colored mantis lands on my hand. In my mind, I ask her to please take me to Balguda. The mantis doesn't fly away until my mind drifts to a specific place along the river where I had briefly been before. The mantis finally takes off. I go there and wait and wait and wait until...
Prende con pica. Jeje. Jeje. Cazzo. Wow.